Have you noticed how, these days, almost no one stops to think, yet everyone has an opinion? It's like the world has turned into a massive choir of voices, all repeating the same lines, each one just trying to shout louder than the rest. And in the middle of all that noise, real thinking, the kind that's born from silence, has become rare. It didn't happen overnight. Little by little, we traded reflection for rush, wisdom for speed. The system didn't have to take anything from us. It only had to keep us busy all the time. And while we thought we were evolving, something inside us began to weaken. Slowly, quietly, without warning, the human mind, once a tool for discovery, has turned into an echo chamber. We don't think to understand anymore. We think to react, to agree, to argue back, to win a debate that never even started. In this frantic rhythm, thinking started to feel like an obstacle, not a necessity. But there's a subtler trap hiding in all this, one that makes us believe we know, when we've only memorized that we understand, when we've only repeated. This is the greatest illusion of our time, the illusion of knowledge. We live in an age where everything seems one click away. You open ChatGPT, type a question, and within seconds, there it is, a perfect answer. Polished, structured, almost convincing. You read it, nod, share it, and feel that little spark of satisfaction that comes with understanding. But did you really understand? Or did you just feel like you did? Because having an answer isn't the same as grasping the question. The truth is, we live in the era of outsourced intelligence. We no longer need to think much, or face the discomfort of, I don't know. Answers come pre-packaged, wrapped in elegant sentences that demand no effort. And that's how, without noticing, the mind loses the habit of reflection. Like a muscle that weakens from lack of use, the result is a generation that knows everything, yet understands almost nothing. Plato once warned that the greatest danger isn't ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And that illusion has never been more seductive than it is now. Technology gives us the feeling of power, of control, of clarity, but real understanding doesn't come from comfort. It comes from doubt, from confusion, from the time we spend trying to figure out what we don't yet grasp. The world doesn't give us that time anymore. It pushes us forward, and thinking slowly has become almost an act of rebellion. How many times have we repeated an idea just because we read it somewhere? How often does an opinion that isn't really ours feel so natural we don't even question where it came from? That's the trickiest part of the illusion of knowledge. The more familiar something sounds, the truer it feels. It's like hearing an echo and mistaking it for your own voice. And that's how, little by little, we stop thinking. Because the echo thinks for us. The collapse of human intelligence begins right there. When we confuse access with wisdom and fluency with depth, the mind stops searching and starts consuming. It stops creating and starts reacting. The illusion of knowledge isn't just a mistake. It's mental anesthesia. And the most dangerous part is that, while it numbs us, we still believe we're awake. There was a time when silence was the birthplace of thought. It was in silence that ideas were born, matured, and took shape. But today, silence feels uncomfortable. If we're in a quiet room, we rush to grab our phones, play a song, open a video, anything to fill the void. And here's the irony. The louder we get, the more afraid we become of what we might hear if the world went silent for just a moment. We're surrounded by sounds, opinions, and endless stimulation, yet rarely do we hear something true. Ourselves, silence, once a space, has turned into an absence, and absence makes us anxious. It's as if, without noise, the world would stop existing. The modern mind has learned to lean on noise to avoid facing its own echo, because silence reveals what noise hides: our doubts, contradictions, and uncomfortable truths. Centuries ago, Blaise Pascal wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." And maybe we've never understood that line better than now. We try to fill every second of emptiness with something: a screen, a chat, a notification, silence, which was meant to heal, has become unbearable. It forces us to look inward. And what we find there isn't always pretty. Think about it. When was the last time you sat in complete silence? No music, no screens, no voices. Just you and your thoughts. That simple act, once natural, now feels almost impossible, because silence takes courage. Courage to face your own mind, to listen to what it has to say without filters. And what it says isn't always what we want to hear. But it's in silence that the mind realigns. That chaos takes form, and noise turns into clarity. Thinking, before anything else, is an act of listening. And as the world keeps screaming louder, maybe true rebellion is the opposite, staying quiet, because it's only in silence that the kind of thought the system fears most can be born, the kind that comes from within. Since childhood, we've been taught to repeat, not to question. In school, the lesson is already given. The right and wrong are predefined, and there's barely any room for doubt. Getting a good grade means memorizing what someone else decided was correct, not understanding what's being said. And that's how we grow up learning to obey ideas, not to create our own. Educator John Taylor Gatto called this intellectual training. He said, "Schools teach obedience, not autonomy." And that line carries a heavy truth. It explains why so many adults are still afraid to think differently. The problem is, the system doesn't end when we graduate. It just changes uniforms. At work, thinking too much means you're difficult. Online, questioning means you're controversial. In politics, disagreeing means you're the enemy. And so the world shapes our minds to operate within invisible boundaries. Secondhand, domesticated, predictable thinking. Collective stupidity isn't an accident. It's a form of control. It's easier to handle a crowd that reacts than individuals who reflect. That's why institutions, schools, companies, governments, even the media, prefer efficient people over thoughtful ones. The system doesn't want questioning minds. It wants compliant ones. It wants consumers, not citizens, followers, not conscious individuals. It's like an invisible factory mass-producing opinions, with everyone convinced they've had an original thought, when, in reality, they've only received a pre-approved version of what to think. Think of a simple example. How many times have you swallowed an idea just because everyone thinks that way? The pressure to agree is so strong that, little by little, we stop noticing how much of our thinking is actually ours. The fear of being excluded, judged, or ridiculed does the rest. It's a subtle kind of censorship. No one forbids you from thinking, but the cost of thinking differently feels too high, so the mind takes the safest path. Silence. The system of ready-made thoughts is the great anesthetic of our century. It offers answers for everything, opinions for every cause, and neatly packaged truths with a seal of social approval. And anyone who thinks outside of that frame is seen as a threat. But real thinking is always risky, because to think is not to repeat, it's to doubt. And that doubt is exactly what the system fears most, because every form of freedom begins there. The human mind was never built for this pace. We try to keep up, but the world moves faster than we can think. Notifications, messages, videos, alerts. Everything comes at once, all the time. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin found that we now process almost 5 times more information per day than we did 30 years ago. It's as if the brain has become a soundboard with every knob turned to the maximum. The result: noise, endless noise. When everything demands attention, nothing truly receives it, and that comes at a high cost. A tired brain doesn't think. It just reacts. It doesn't analyze. It simply responds to whatever appears. That's why, even after a full day of consuming information, we go to bed with a full head and an empty mind. It's exhaustion that doesn't come from the body, but from the mind. And the scariest part is how normal it has become. This overload of stimuli creates a constant feeling of urgency. The mind lives in survival mode, trying to keep up with a world that never slows down. It's like trying to listen to a symphony while 1,000 radios play at once. In the end, the music disappears, and all that's left is noise. And when everything is noise, even ideas start to lose their shape. A saturated mind can no longer tell what's essential from what's irrelevant. This mental fatigue isn't just a side effect. It's a mechanism of control. The more tired people are, The less they question, an exhausted brain seeks comfort, and comfort lives in pre-made answers. That's how manipulation works. Not through force, but through fatigue. Constant distraction is the most effective way to domesticate thought. Thinking takes effort, and a tired brain always chooses the easiest route. Repetition, that's why in an overstimulated world, the real luxury isn't access to information. It's clarity. Clarity has become an act of resistance, because only a rested mind can see what the noise is trying to hide. And maybe that's where the revolution begins, when someone chooses to stop, breathe, and listen to their own thoughts again. Algorithms know more about us than we do. They know what makes us angry, what moves us, what keeps us hooked. They're invisible, yet everywhere, deciding what we see, what we read, even what we believe. It's like an invisible lens filtering reality, giving us a world tailor-made not for our freedom, but for our attention. Tristan Harris, a former Google designer, calls this the war for your attention. And he's right. Every second we spend reflecting is a second those companies lose in profit. That's why algorithms are designed to eliminate pauses. They learn what holds us and feed it back endlessly. The more we react, the more predictable we become. And predictability means power. Think about it. You believe you're choosing what you consume, but most of the time, you're being chosen. The video you watch, the song you listen to, the news that shows up on your feed, all of it is the result of a calculation. And that calculation doesn't aim to inform or educate you. It just wants to keep you there. The algorithm doesn't care about truth. It only measures effectiveness. And the scariest part is that, over time, this mechanism doesn't just decide what we see. It starts shaping who we are, with every like, comment, and click. It builds a version of us and feeds it back, until one day we can't tell whether we think what we think, because we believe it, or because the system wanted us to. It's a quiet form of conditioning, far subtler than any old-school propaganda. The rule of algorithms is a new kind of prison. Comfortable, colorful, addictive. It has no bars, yet it keeps us locked inside bubbles of certainty. And while we believe we're exploring the world, we're really just walking in circles inside a digital cage that adapts to our every move. Technology hasn't stolen our freedom to think. It's convinced us there's no reason to use it. We live surrounded by a diet of fast, easy, and addictive content. It's mental fast food, instant flavor, zero nutrition. Social media serves up tiny bits of information wrapped for quick consumption. 15-second videos, catchy quotes, opinions shrunk into memes. We consume, feel a false sense of satisfaction, and minutes later, we're hungry again, not for knowledge, but for stimulation. Neuroscientist Marianne Wolf explains that the human brain is changing. We're losing the ability to read deeply. Reading once required focus and imagination. Now we skip words like we skip thoughts. It happens because the brain adapts to what it practices most. And what we practice now is speed. The faster we go, the harder it becomes to slow down. Thinking has turned into an interrupted process, like a video that never fully loads. Mental fast food doesn't want you to reflect. It wants you to consume. The logic is simple. The faster you move to the next piece of content, the longer you stay on the platform. So thought becomes a production line. Each idea is chewed, swallowed, and replaced before it's even digested. We've stopped learning and started consuming knowledge, as if wisdom were disposable entertainment. The effects are easy to see, conversations have become short, opinions shallow, patience thin. We want instant answers to complex questions. We want to understand the world in the time it takes to watch a reel. That's why deep reflection feels boring. It doesn't give the same quick hit of pleasure that short content does. But just as the body gets sick on a diet of sugar, the mind gets sick on a diet of stimulation. Thinking takes digestion, and digestion takes time. That's why slowing down is an act of rebellion. It's choosing quality over quantity. It's accepting that knowledge doesn't come ready-made. It's built slowly, like a meal cooked on low heat. Mental fast food feeds the ego, but wisdom feeds the soul. And that's what the system fears most. because a conscious mind won't settle for crumbs. We like to believe we're rational, but the truth is, we're driven by emotion. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, winner of the Nobel Prize, explained that the brain works with two systems, one fast, automatic, and emotional, and another slow, analytical, and rational. But today, almost everything in the world is designed to keep us trapped in the first, and that changes everything. Because when emotion takes over, thought disappears, social media learned how to turn that into profit. They know that what goes viral isn't what makes people think, but what makes them feel anger, fear, outrage. Perfect fuels for attention. That's why the most shared content is rarely the truest. It's the most emotional. An angry tweet, a clash on video, a provocative headline. All of it activates the impulsive part of the brain. And the more we react, the more the machine learns how to provoke us. Emotion has become a product, and the logic is simple. A calm brain thinks, an agitated brain consumes. So the more irritated people are, the more time they spend on their screens. The information industry doesn't want balance. It wants engagement. And for that, it needs chaos. A peaceful mind doesn't click, doesn't buy promises, doesn't panic over headlines. So the system feeds emotion, because emotion is predictable, easy to manipulate. Think about how public debate has turned into a battlefield. People no longer talk to understand. They talk to win. No one listens. Everyone shouts. Reason has given way to the need to be right. Dialogue has become a contest, and empathy a weakness. Emotion, which should connect us, now divides us. And in the middle of this emotional noise, truth has become just another opinion. The collapse of intelligence begins when emotion replaces reason. Not because feeling is wrong, but because feeling without understanding is dangerous. Thinking requires distance, it requires pause, and the modern world gives us neither. Maybe the first step toward clarity is this: to relearn how to feel without losing ourselves, because emotion is a great messenger, but a terrible driver. Thinking for yourself sounds beautiful, but living it is hard. Psychoanalyst and philosopher Erich Fromm said that many people would rather escape from freedom than face the responsibility that comes with thinking, and that explains a lot. Because being free isn't just doing what you want. It's carrying the weight of deciding for yourself. It's facing uncertainty, mistakes, and judgment. So, over time, many trade freedom for the comfort of belonging, even if that belonging costs them their truth. The truth is, the group brings comfort, being aligned, following the consensus, repeating the collective opinion. It avoids conflict, avoids rejection, and the fear of rejection is one of the most powerful feelings humans have. That's why, even when something feels wrong, we stay silent. Think of that moment when everyone agrees on something absurd, but you swallow your doubt because no one else seems to care. That silence is the cement of conformity. This dynamic isn't new, but the digital world has amplified it. Social media created new herds, tribes of opinion that offer belonging in exchange for blind loyalty. And the strangest thing is, these tribes promise freedom. Here, you can be yourself. But in practice, the price is to think like everyone else. To disagree is betrayal. To question is desertion. A critical mind becomes a threat. So, to avoid being canceled, many people simply conform. And slowly, individuality dissolves into the crowd. Fromm called this automatic conformity, the state in which people believe they're being authentic, while merely adapting to what their environment expects. It's a form of social anesthesia. A person doesn't feel they've lost their freedom, because they can still choose, but every choice is predictable. They don't realize that, in the quest to belong, it's their thinking that got left behind. Deep down, thinking differently hurts. It hurts to be the only one to raise your hand, the only one to disagree, the only one to say, "I don't know." But it's in that discomfort that clarity is born, because whoever dares to step out of the herd discovers a kind of freedom the group can't offer, the freedom to be honest with yourself. And maybe that's the rarest and bravest kind of intelligence we still have. Ignorance stopped being a problem. It became a product, and a very profitable one. We live in a system that learned how to turn confusion into an economy, When people are tired, misinformed, and emotionally unstable, they consume more, they buy promises, distractions, and ready-made narratives. It's cruel, but it works. Because an exhausted mind doesn't look for truth. It looks for relief, George Orwell said. In times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's never felt truer. Today, deceit fuels the market. Fake news, distorted headlines, manufactured controversies. All of it generates engagement, and engagement makes money. Fear sells clicks. Anxiety sells medicine. Exhaustion sells distractions. It's a perfect loop. And the more we spin inside it, the harder it is to get out. The logic is simple. The more confused a population is, the more predictable it becomes. Too much information creates paralysis. Constant doubt weakens action, so the system may look chaotic on the outside, but inside it's extremely efficient. It keeps you reacting, arguing, buying, tiring, and never thinking enough to change the game. Distraction has become a gentle kind of domination. No bars, no violence, just notifications. Modern ignorance isn't a lack of data. It's too much of it. The problem isn't emptiness, it's overflow. And while people believe they're getting informed, they're only being entertained. It's like drinking seawater. The more you consume, the thirstier you get. There's content in excess, but no substance. And that's the trick. Keeping everyone busy enough not to notice the void. In the end, collective foolishness is great business. It sustains an entire industry of superficiality, and the only antidote isn't out there. It's in here, because thinking today is subversive. It's looking at an ad and asking why. It's hearing a headline and asking who benefits from this. Wisdom was never free. And now, it's almost forbidden. Thinking takes courage. And maybe one of the greatest forms of courage today is admitting we might be wrong. But we live in a culture that worships certainty. Everyone wants to be right. And being right has become a status symbol. People don't argue to learn, they argue to win, And in the process, thought dies. Because whoever fears being wrong, fears thinking. Nietzsche said, "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies." He was right. A lie can be dismantled. But conviction is too comfortable to question. It builds a psychological bubble where everything seems to make sense. Doubt, which should drive thought, starts to look like weakness. That's where the ego steps in. Guarding our "I'm right." It would rather distort the world than admit a mistake. This fear isn't just intellectual. It's emotional. Being wrong makes us feel unsafe, vulnerable, exposed from childhood. We learn that mistakes are shameful, not educational. So we grow up running from them like running from fire. But without mistakes, there's no discovery. Without discomfort, there's no growth. Critical thinking is born right at that friction between what we know and what we don't yet understand. Think about how many times you avoided changing your mind just so you wouldn't look indecisive. Or how many times you defended an idea simply because you'd defended it before. That's the ego trying to preserve the image of coherence, even if it costs the truth. But changing your mind isn't weakness. It's growth. Only those who dare to contradict themselves dare to learn. In the end, the fear of being wrong is what keeps the system running. Because if you're afraid of being wrong, you won't risk thinking differently. And if you don't think differently, you keep obeying. Doubt is the first step toward freedom, And maybe the most revolutionary thought of all is this. What if I'm wrong? After so much noise, the mind asks for rest. And it's in that space, between one thought and the next, that something rare appears. Conscious silence. Krishnamurti said, "The beginning of wisdom is observation without judgment." And that's what we've forgotten to do. We spend so much time reacting, opining, analyzing, that we've unlearned how to simply look. Real thinking isn't stacking ideas. It's knowing when to stop and listen. True intelligence doesn't happen when the mind is full, but when it's present. The problem is that being present requires slowing down. And slowing down now feels almost like a crime. We live with the sense that stopping is a waste of time. But what we really lose is the ability to see things as they are. The world shouts and wisdom whispers. Only those who learn to hear the whisper escape the noise. Think of silence as a mirror. It shows what lies behind the distractions. What you feel, what you fear, what you avoid. That's why it scares us. Silence isn't emptiness, it's revelation. It brings to the surface the parts of us that noise keeps hidden. And that meeting is hard, but necessary. It's where confusion turns into clarity, and fear into understanding. Krishnamurti also said that between stimulus and response there is a small space, and in that space lies human freedom. It's there, in that instant, before the automatic reaction, that we can choose what to think, what to feel, what to do. But the modern world has shrunk that space. It wants us to react, not reflect. So returning to a quiet mind is, at its core, an act of resistance, saying no to haste, no to noise, no to the automatic. Thinking is like lighting a candle in a storm. The flame is fragile, it flickers, it almost goes out. But it's the only source of light. And while the world runs around trying to light everything with screens, maybe the real light is that small flame, burning inside whoever still has the courage to stop. The collapse of human intelligence isn't inevitable. It only continues while we sleep with our eyes open, convinced that thinking doesn't matter. But thinking is exactly what the system fears most, because a true thought has power. It breaks narratives, dissolves illusions, and turns on lights where there was only noise. Every person who chooses to think for themselves becomes a spark in a world that tries to put out every hint of clarity. To resist today isn't to shout. It's to observe. It isn't to react. It's to understand. It isn't to follow. It's to choose your own path, even when it feels lonely. The revolution the world needs won't happen in the streets. It will happen in our minds. The system can control information, but it can't control an awakened conscience. And that's exactly what it fears. The mind that returns to thinking. The person who begins to see. Awakening doesn't happen all at once. It begins with small gestures, turning off notifications, reading something to the end, pausing before reacting. Simple actions that restore what was taken from us. The time to think, and that time is sacred. It's where we remember who we are and learn to tell what is truly ours from what was programmed to feel like ours. We live in a world that values noise, but it's silence that changes things. Not the silence of omission, but the silence that listens before it acts, thinking. Today is an act of rebellion. It's the most subversive and the most human a gesture there is, because when one mind wakes up, it wakes others. And that's how every revolution begins. Invisible, quiet, personal. There are no eternal systems when individuals are awake. Collapse only wins when silence conquers the mind. So think, even if it hurts, especially when it hurts, because it's in that very pain, the pain of seeing, that freedom begins.